A big welcome to everybody. My name is Richard Huddleston and I'm privileged to be the head of documentary at Screen Australia. This webinar is being held from the lands of the Gadigal people today of the larger Eora Nation, and I would like to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and also to acknowledge the various countries you are all joining me from today. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about the changes to the Screen Australia documentary funding programs. They will be going live from July the 1st, so just over a month's time. We are still working on the finer details, but I wanted to give you the headlines and the major changes that are going to come into effect so we can get the heads up. A little bit of housekeeping before we dive in. This webinar is being provided by Zoom webinar technology. That means that you can see and hear me, but I can't hear or see you. There will be an opportunity to answer questions. I'll be running a Q&A at the end of the webinar, but please put your questions at any time into the webinar using the Q&A tool, and you should find that at the bottom of your screen. If we don't get to answer all of the questions today, we'll put them in our frequently asked questions, which will be released alongside the guidelines. And finally, last bit of housekeeping, this recording will be made available on the Screen Australia YouTube channel later this week, and will be published with the guidelines on our website on July the 1st. Okay, so Screen Australia 2025. For those of you that joined us either at AIDC or at Screen Forever, you'll be aware that we are evolving to support a vibrant, viable screen industry that reflects the depth and diversity of Australian stories. You may have seen our chair, Michael Ebeid, announce these at the Screen Forever conference, our new strategic framework, which the agency has been working on over the last few months. And essentially, that is to adapt to the rapidly changing environment that we all know all too well. We want to be able to empower practitioners to tackle the challenges of today, as well as seizing future opportunities. And those changes really are designed to support innovative approaches to our modern screen landscape, yet continue to support the exceptional caliber and performance of established approaches. The changes that we are going to be talking about today have been informed through industry insights, as well as the recent responses to our survey, the industry-wide survey, and also the Australian documentary survey that we did back in May or June of last year. And also, keeping in mind of the change in viewing habits and shifts in commissioning and distribution models that place greater emphasis on market and audience. So, and then, just to quickly touch on documentary at the moment. Really, one of the major reasons that we are doing these changes is that our guidelines, our funding programs have not changed in over a decade. And obviously in that time, our world, our landscape has changed. There's been so much disruptions in our sector, not just locally, but on a global scale, and that's been characterized by changes across production, financing, distribution, and consumption. So really the headline is that demand on our funding is increasing. Not all of the projects that have come into Screen Australia this financial year have been assessed yet, but we do know that there's already an increase in applications from last year. And, that probably means that realistically speaking, just being transparent, the percentage of projects that we can fund with the same budget that we have probably will decline. So yes, it's a very competitive landscape out there. Okay, so basically our new funding programs, they have three broad ambitions. We want to support distinctive and quality storytelling for a range of audiences aligned to platform at a range of budget levels. We also want to support content makers that are connected to compelling stories that reflect the breadth of Australia in service of cultural, creative, and economic outcomes. And finally, We want to support content makers and stories with viable pathways to market partners and audiences either locally and or globally. Before I walk through the changes, I should say that I don't think these changes are radical, rather that we are modifying them to adapt to the landscape that I've just touched on. So essentially, from July 1, just over a month's time, there will be 4 documentary funding programs. Development. The major change to development is that from July, we will be funding direct-to-audience projects. Those have previously been under the guidance of people like Lee Nemo and Louise Goff and the incredible team there. But from 1st of July, direct-to-audience funding will come under the documentary unit. So ultimately, what does that mean? Well, we'll be funding development for all platforms and formats, whether it's theatrical, features, series, and singles, or direct-to-audience content on online platforms such as YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, and also we will continue to support AR, VR, MR, and XR projects. We will also include time-critical shooting within the development. We will still have fortnightly development meetings. They normally take place on a Thursday morning, and we expect to give a decision within 8 weeks of you submitting your application. Just to quickly touch on credit requirements. For direct-to-audience projects at development stage, we will not need any credit requirements. That will change as we go into production. But for other projects, individuals or teams must have a key creative with at least 2 eligible credits in the role of producer, director, or writer. So that's our development landscape. Look, again, just reiterating, it's highly competitive. I would encourage applicants to really strategize about their development approach with Screen Australia. Quite often what we're seeing is that people are submitting for the... Sorry, I'm just being interrupted. Are you? Thank you. A nice reminder. Thank you, Amy. Yeah, there we go. So I forgot to click through. Yeah, so just a reminder that obviously they are highly competitive. We encourage you to strategize. Quite often, as I was saying, we see producers who submit an application for the maximum ask. Quite often, that maximum ask does not reflect what they want to do with their development and what they want to deliver. So really encourage you to be really kind of strategic on what you want from the development. We also, it's surprising that we don't see a lot of projects that initially go to state funding agencies. It really surprises me that we don't see projects where, a lot of projects anyway, where state funding agencies are attached. So, you know, is there a way that you can kind of do a kind of 2-stage development where you go to the your local screen agency for kind of seed funding, if you like, and then once you've done that, you can then come to us for a kind of 2nd stage funding opportunity. So yeah, so development, basically, we'll be funding all platforms and all formats. Okay, I'm going to remember to click through on this one. Direct-to-audience production funding. So just building off the back of the news that we will be funding development for direct-to-audience projects, that also applies to our production funding opportunities. So that's something that is new. This is a whole new production funding program for documentaries. What does that mean in terms of the kind of practicalities? There will be 4 meetings, decision meetings per year, and we are having a 10 to 12 week turnaround for those decisions. Credit requirement, unlike in development, where no credit requirements are needed for direct-to-audience development, we will be asking for 1 key creative within that team to have 1 key credit on a comparable project which has already been publicly released on a screen-based device. And really what I'm excited about is, I think, for those of you who were at AIDC in March and attended the online session at AIDC, you know, it was really a packed out session. And I think what it shows is that documentary practitioners are increasingly wanting to learn more about online, more about how it can be funded, how it can be monetized, what a marketing, what a distribution strategy looks like, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, it was great to see so many people attend that session at AIDC. And just to let you know that in the coming months, we'll also be providing more education and knowledge sharing opportunities in this direct audience space. So look out for those coming down the pipeline. What else do I need to say? Oh, yeah, I guess, you know, obviously this space is always changing. Pathways are fast changing. So as we kind of evolve these funding programs and we go through year on year, there may be new release platforms that come into existence that will also be eligible alongside the kind of examples that we've kind of alluded to there. So yeah, so that's the second funding program. The Producer First program, you know, that is really there to provide an opportunity for foundation funding for producers to secure deals and build their creative plan for their documentary as they go through the evolution of that process. The main change to this program is that we will be going from 3 to 4 decision meetings per year. We've had those, it's been 3 decision meetings over the past year or so, but due to the volume, we need to increase that to 4. And also we will be factoring in for the Producer First program, projects under 500,000. So for projects under 500,000 of total budget, if you have market attachment to that project, you do not need any credit requirements. However, if you have a project under 500,000 that you would like to submit to the Producer First program that has no market attachment, we will be asking for 1 credit required in that role of producer, director, or writer. And what does an eligible credit mean? It ultimately means you have a credit on a production that is 30 minutes or longer, it's being broadcast by a recognized commissioning platform, or it has a commercial theatrical release, or it's been invited to screen at a major festival or conference such as TIFF, Cannes, South by Southwest, Sundance, CBH Docs, etc., etc. So yeah, just to reiterate, just going through those. Yeah, and also obviously we can be first in the finance plan with the Producer First program. So that's something to keep in mind. You don't have to have a confirmed finance plan. We can be first in, like I say, decisions for a year. And I just went through the credit requirements. Okay. This is the Platform First funding program. This is replacing the commissioned program that currently exists. And this basically is a platform for anything that has market attachment already committed to it. So unlike the Producer First program, we are last in your finance plan. Your finance plan is locked in. The major change to the Platform First as opposed to the commissioned program is that in the commission program, it was basically a rolling assessment. So we would be fed projects throughout the year on a case-by-case basis. That really needs to change. And what we're doing is we are going to be taking the Platform First to 4 decision meetings per year. Sorry, I'm really bad at the click-through, aren't I? I must get better at that. Obviously, for the for your market attachment, which is needed for this, we do need a MOU between the producer and the marketplace to be supplied with your application. Our maximum contribution is 500,000, and like I said, we're last into the finance plan. Decisions for a year, and we will be doing a 10 to 12 week turnaround on that decision. And really, the reason why we have changed from a kind of case-by-case assessment process is to 4 meetings a year is really to align this funding program with every single other funding program that is in Screen Australia, whether it's across scripted, development, or documentary. It's to align with our processes and systems across the entire agency, and also to take into account the fact that the marketplace is more competitive now than it was 10 years ago when the previous funding programs were set up. In terms of credit requirements, again, just touched on projects under 500,000, but for projects over 500,000, must include 1 producer, director, or writer who has at least 2 eligible credits in their respective role. Okay, in terms of criteria that we will be looking at, I guess there are 3 main ones: strength of the idea, strength of the team, strength of the audience pathway. There will be nuance in how we assess them depending on the what funding program that is related to. But also we'll be looking at, obviously, a big one is the strength of the market opportunity, and looking at the finance and budget to make sure that that is aligned with the kind of aims and objectives of the project in relation to the audience that it will be hoping to attract. So they are the criteria that we will be assessing projects on. As I said, there is nuance in those that will be detailed in the guidelines when they're released on July the 1st. In terms of next steps, they will be released July the 1st on the Screen Australia website. We are finalising the first funding round dates, so I know you'll be keen to know what they are. We're currently working on that. As soon as we have some information, we'll be sharing that through our Screen agency distribution platforms, through comms. We have got some time for some questions, but if you have any others after this, please send them to documentary@screenaustralia.gov.au. Okay, let me go to some questions. I have one here. Will you give the 4 meeting dates to the sector? The answer to that is yes, we will be sharing those dates. We're just working on those now, working through those, and yeah, we will absolutely be sharing those dates with everybody once they are finalised. So I'm just looking at those ones coming through. The credit requirement for the direct audience stream. If you have a credit on a broadcast TV documentary, does this satisfy the credit requirement, or does it have to have an online credit? Look, I think if you have a broadcast credit, that definitely will apply. But we would like to ideally see an online credit if you have one. So, but yeah, we will be accepting traditional, for want of a better word, credits. I understand your goal of early stage development from a state agency, but have you read the SAFC guidelines or only pathway? Yes, I'm aware of the SAFC guidelines, South Australia guidelines. So yes, I'm aware that with in South Australia, you need to have Screen Australia funding before you can apply for your own state funding. So I guess that's referencing my previous comment about some projects not having state funding attached at the beginning. So yeah, I take that on board that does not apply to South Australia. A recognized broadcasting platform, does that include a network like Fox or History Channel. Yes, that does include something like History Channel. Absolutely is a recognized platform. I've got another one. Can I confirm the 500K for producer first is the total film budget, or Screen Australia asked? So yeah, just to clarify that is not the total film budget. That is the total Screen Australia ask is capped at 500,000. I mean, in terms of, I can see a top of a minimum license fee question, but I can imagine I know what that question is. So look, we are on the record at saying that license fees will be changing. What we are currently doing is there's a series of processes that we need to go through to make that happen. We are going through those processes at the moment. We've been working on this for some time and we have momentum on that. And as soon as we have settled on that with our stakeholders in the marketplace, then we'll be coming back to industry to share that. But yeah, certainly there is some work going on with minimum license fees.
Okay, how about a question about what the caps are for the different things? 500,000 is confusing for people. Is it a cap of our contribution?
That's our funding. So that is our contribution to your finance plan is 500,000.
Will there be discrete pots of funding for each stream, or projects in one stream be in competition for projects in another stream?
Projects will be, I have a budget, and projects, there'll be certain pots for certain funding programs. The answer is yes.
Does time-sensitive funding still have to go through the 6 to 8 week turnaround?
Yes, it does. Yes.
Multi-platform projects, how do we apply for funding with different platforms, feature doc plus VR, for example?
That is a good question. I guess it depends on what your primary release strategy is. If it's a feature, then you would apply first for that. You could only apply for one funding stream though. We wouldn't be able to allocate funding to one project across two. So you'd have to be able to roll that into one application, depending on your kind of primary release strategy.
There's another question regarding last in commitment for producer projects with state agencies. How can we both be last in?
That is the same process that has been in place originally. So we are talking to stakeholders, our screen agency counterparts, about our guidelines once they are finalised. So yeah, we'll be getting the state agencies across our funding programs once the details are finalised.
But some questions and some confusion around the old version of the online production funding for documentary. Is this now replaced with the new combined program? Some clarification on the direct-to-audience funding.
So direct-to-audience funding, basically, we will have direct-to-audience funding for development and direct-to-audience funding for production. And the funding programs that are currently live within Screen Australia, as of July the 1st, they will no longer be live, and it will switch to documentary looking after development for direct-to-audience and production funding for direct-to-audience.
And related to that question is, will online/social media experts be involved in assessing applications? Or is it the same decision making?
Yeah, that's a good question. So obviously, there's two kind of strands to that answer. We have within the agency experts in online. We will be utilising those experts within our assessment. We also have online experts within our team. As we go through and evolve these funding projects, and we get into the rhythm and the swing in terms of the documentary team, we will be looking to grow the skill set of the team with more online experience. So we have have people within the agency that look at our assessments, and then if we need a specialist assessor or internal assessors are at capacity, we do is we go out to external assessors. We have a whole range of assessors on our books that we use regularly. They're drawn from all across Australia, different skill sets, different knowledge, different expertise. And yes, we use them now, and we will be continuing to use them within the future.
Okay, just shifting over to the Producer First program. It says, Producer program doesn't need marketplace attachment. What is the nuance of this? Will productions with marketplace attachment be allowed to apply?
If you look, marketplace attachment, if you have confirmed marketplace attachment, as I said, the MOU, then that has to go through, for Australian confirmed attachment, that has to go through the platform first round. So if you've got it confirmed, then you need to go to that. If you have some interest, and it might be through a kind of an EOI or an LOI, so it's a kind of early conversation that you may have had with a broadcaster, then you can come through the Producer First program. But if, like I say, if your market attachment is confirmed, then you have to go to the platform first avenue.
Could you clarify the minimum content length required to qualify for an online credit?
Yeah, that again, that's a good question. Obviously, I referenced for non-direct audience, it's a half-hour credit requirement, but for direct audience, i.e. YouTube, TikTok, obviously that would not apply. So there wouldn't be a specific duration attached to direct audience projects.
For projects under 500,000 total budget that would formally be funded through PEP, now eligible through Producer First, is there any quota or discrete funding for low budget projects, or are they in competition with all the high budget projects?
All projects of all sizes and shapes are competitively assessed alongside other projects within those funding rounds. So there's no quota for projects under 500,000.
Will Screen Australia assist with matching our projects to market if we are coming in for development?
Look, I think in terms of assist, I think we absolutely do offer advice. I think, part of what we do is to matchmake. We see, projects from looking for funding from all around the world. We regularly liaise with sales agents, distributors, and networks, internationally. So we have a kind of good sense of who's in the market for what. We talk to them when we're in Australia or when we're at conferences overseas. We meet them in person. We also regularly update distributors, sales agents with projects that are looking for rest of the world attachment. I would say that what we don't do is pitch projects on producers' behalf. Rather than what we do is we ultimately see an opportunity for a producer with the rest of the world, looking for the rest of the world, and we look at our database and work out, okay, what sales agents, what distributors are looking for similar content, and we communicate those opportunities with those distributors and sales agents on that international level.
There's quite a few questions requesting clarification on Producer First. For example, there's questions around when the deadlines are going to be published to the sector, for example, or turnaround times and those kinds of details around Producer First.
So as I say, we are working through the finer details. I had a meeting this morning where we were talking about the first dates for the funding rounds. I can assure you, we are almost there on that. It's a complicated matrix that we have to put together with because it relies on all the decision dates across all funding. So it's not just, the team that look after that, the amazing props team, they're not just focused on the documentary applications, they're focused on all applications across the agency. So it's easier said than done, believe you me. but we are very, very close to that, and I expect we'll have that resolved, certainly within the next week. And then once we have the first date, we'll be able to communicate that through our normal comms channels. And if you're not kind of subscribed to the Screen Australia newsletter, then please do that, because that's where regular updates are given. So I encourage anybody who isn't subscribed to our platforms for comms, please do that.
There is several questions around the direct to audience. Are they considered at the same time? Can you confirm the audience cap? Just details around the direct to audience programs.
So direct to audience, just to reiterate, there will be 4 decision meetings throughout the year. They are not those projects that are in that direct to audience funding program. They won't be assessed against other ones from the platform first or the producer first. They will only be assessed with the projects that are applying for that particular round. So they're not in competition with platform first or producer first. It really is about the direct audience applications within that round that are assessed, and no others are taken into account. What was the other question there, Daniela? Sorry.
Around caps, as in what are the caps for direct to audience projects?
Yeah, so that is one thing that we are still finalizing on. We're just looking at some data from previous years to determine where we land on that. So again, that will be something that we'll be publishing on July the 1st, but that is something that we're still assessing.
Back to direct to audience, can you please clarify, would the online projects be in competition with features or traditional series? I think you've just answered that.
No, definitely not.
Yep.
Definitely not.
Can we bring in feature projects through the Producer First program that are almost finished and have attracted festival or distribution interest?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Can you provide any insight on how international co-productions will be assessed?
They will be assessed in relation to whatever else is in the within that specific round that they are submitted to. So obviously, I would kind of say with a caveat that we do encourage international co-productions. Michelle McDonald is the expert within the agency. If you want to kind of find out more, if you've got a project that you think is relevant for an international co-production opportunity, then Michelle is here to help advise you. But obviously, yeah, I think what I've learned from, I've had 4 decision meetings now in a year or so that I've been here, and they are all exceptionally different. So it's really hard for me to say on a specific co-production opportunity within a round whether it will be advantageous or not, because I really don't know what it would be being assessed up against. So what I would kind of say is ultimately we encourage international co-productions, obviously from a financing point of view, from a broader audience point of view, from a fact that if you find the right partner, you can develop your skills, you can develop ongoing business opportunities. And that's why Michelle has the new role that she has at Screen Australia, is because we acknowledge the importance of co-productions. Projects will be assessed alongside the ones in that specific round.
There is some clarification, I think, needed around marketplace attachments. This question is, can you clarify again, if you have a marketplace attachment, an MOU, do we need to apply to platform first program? And if only early marketplace interest, like an expression of interest, we apply to producer first program?
Yeah, so if you've got an MOU and your finance plan is locked in, you just need, you need one more line to fill your finance plan, then absolutely you go to platform first. But if you're in an earlier discussion with a market attachment and your finance plan has a long way to go to being closed, then you come to the producer first. So yeah, if you've got an MOU, confirmed market attachment, platform first. If you don't, you're talking to various, as we have at the moment in the old producer program, people are at various stages of conversations with local marketplace, with international marketplace. If you're early stage and your finance plan is still relatively young, then you come to the producer first.
For direct to audience under 500,000 that don't need credits, is it under 500,000 total budget or total ask?
So
there's a lot of questions around the ask versus budget.
Yeah, so just to reiterate again, for direct to audience, we're still working on the details of what that ask will be. So I'm not in a position at the moment to be able to share that, because that's an ongoing piece of work. And again, just I hope that's not too frustrating for people. Like, we are still a month out from these guidelines going live, so I hope you can appreciate that there's still, we're still kind of going through some of those to finalize them. So I can't answer every single question today.
If a show is rejected in one round of Platform First, can it be resubmitted in the next?
So yes, so we have a policy where if you submit your project and it gets declined for the first time, you are allowed to bring back that project as long as there are changes to that project that you've addressed from our feedback to your initial application. So the short answer is yes, you can come in a second time as long as there are notable changes to the kind of question marks we had over in our first assessment.
How do feature documentaries intended for theatrical release, which may have a DA but no license, fit into this producer/platform first programs?
So they would come through the producer first program.
If a project submits to the producer first and is declined, can they later apply through the platform first with confirmed marketplace?
Yes, if your project has evolved and you've got confirmed marketplace and you have it again, going back to you've addressed the the question marks that were raised in the first assessment, and that acknowledges the flexibility in your negotiations and your discussions with various broadcasters and the evolution of your idea. Obviously, with the producer first program, ideas are quite often at an earlier stage. So absolutely, there is an opportunity. If you are successful with marketplace attachment further down the track, then you can come back in for platform first funding.
Just again about marketplace, what level of interest do you mean by early stage from marketplace interest? What does that actually mean?
Yeah, look, it can mean a whole range of different things. So to give you some examples, when we have applications coming in, they may have had an initial discussion with marketplace here, whether it's a broadcaster, whether it's a streamer, whether it's a theatrical distributor. It could also be an international sales agent. It could be an international distributor. They're keeping tabs on things. So it's really, all projects are very different. There's no kind of straight rule about what defines market attachment, because there's so much in that kind of producer first realm. There's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of gray, and there's a lot of, quite often producers are speculating, they're looking around, looking at what that international landscape is like, and they might be talking to 4 or 5 different distributors or sales agents. So, it can be very early days in those discussions, but obviously not for the platform first fund where you have to have that MOU in place. But just keeping in mind, just kind of riffing on that, obviously, because the funding is so competitive, the more clear indication you can give us of market interest, the better that will be. I think at the bottom of the scale, it's like, I'm talking to Dogwolf. I've been speaking to SBS, or I've been speaking to Disney. They're initially interested. That probably is not going to be as competitive as an idea that has an LOI or an expression of interest from marketplace. So it's really that, I guess that comes down to then, when do you think your project is most advantageous to submit? we've got 4 funding rounds a year now, so really kind of think carefully about, due to the competitive nature of all our funding programs, how can you give your project the best chance of getting some of our funding?
Are QAPE or non-QAPE rules still applicable with these programs?
Yes.
What happens for resubmission if a project simply loses out to competition in that particular round, rather than it requiring changes?
Well, there'll always be, in my experience of being in this role for a year, there is always, if something does not get approved in a funding round, there is always something that can be improved or altered or tinkered. So it's I haven't seen anything yet where we would be accepting something that there was no changes attached to it. And I think a producer would be, if they've been, just putting myself in the shoes of a producer, if you have been declined for funding previously, I think it would make sense to really, off the feedback that we would give you, to kind of go away and think about how you could make that second application stronger. So yeah, that's my advice, is that there's always ways of improving projects if they're being declined.
How do you assess non-traditional pathways to audience, such as viable impact or self-distribution plans?
Yep. So really what that comes down to is your marketing and pathway to audience strategy. That is a really important part of the assessment criteria that we'd be looking at for projects that are self-funded or direct to audience. Is what is your marketing and distribution strategy? We will be looking at that really closely, because obviously if you have a project that is attached to a marketplace, that kind of release strategy to a degree is dictated to and controlled by the streamer or the broadcaster. Whereas if you're self-funding direct to audience, such as a YouTube project, we'd be really looking at, what is the amount of content that you have, that you're proposing to create for that project, and how will you essentially divide that content across online platforms to ensure that you can, the algorithm can work in your favor, and you can ultimately provide content over a long period of time. We know that a single drop isn't necessarily gonna kind of rise above everything else. So it's really looking at your strategy about how you're going to find an audience. And with impact, there was an impact related part of that question. Obviously, we fund a lot of amazing projects that have impact attached to them. Can think of one that's had over 150 community screenings. And again, it's really looking at who you're partnering with, what they bring to the collaboration, and what your project kind of long-term ambitions and plans are, because we know that with projects with impact campaigns attached, or an impact related focus, they live long after a project has been released in a theatre, or has been released online, or has been released with a broadcaster. So we'd be really looking at what's the long tail plan for your project, how are you going to fund that, who are you partnering with, and what are the outcomes that you're hoping to achieve through that.
Will you accept budgets that include payment for producers in development?
Yes.
Where does unscripted TV series fit into these models?
Historically, most of them have come through the old commissioned door. So that's historically where Screen Australia has funded most series, has been through that. And I would imagine that would continue through the Platform First new fund. That is my kind of expectation, that will continue. If
a project is competitive and the only major funding issue is that the ask is too high, will it be rejected?
No. Look, we always try to meet producers' required ask, but in reality, like I've said numerous times, competition for limited funds is extreme. and quite often we will approve a project, but at a reduced ask as to the one that the producer was hoping they would get. So, you know, best case scenario is that, yes, we can fund your required amount, but in reality, due to, you know, competition and limited funds, that does not always happen.
This is a general question. What's the most common reason that applications for the Producer First program are rejected?
I think there's probably two, because we're not looking so much at, you know, where you're at in your financing. Obviously, we do look at what the kind of your budget expectation is and look at it like that. But we appreciate that, you know, at that early stage, your financing is still evolving. I think the two major things that we see are really not a great kind of creative vision for the project. You know, we are looking in today's fragmented landscape where competition for eyeballs is really strong. You know, we do want to see projects that are innovative in some shape or form. We do want to see producers pushing the boundaries, pushing the envelope of creativity. You know, there's been some incredible projects that I've seen in my time here in the last year where producers are absolutely doing that. And undoubtedly what that does is it just makes your project rise above all the others. If you've got just something really special that you're doing, whether it's the creative execution or the use of new technology. So, you know, that is something that, you know, definitely we look at. And then the other one, which is a really big one, I think is, and it's arguably bigger, is producers not really having a good sense of who their audience is for their project. I think, you know, increasingly what we're kind of been talking about internally is who is the community for your project, sorry, rather than an audience. So quite often, you know, bearing in mind that, you know, you've really got to put your best foot forward. It's not good enough if we're getting projects where people are identifying their primary audience as, and you know, I'm kind of simplifying this in a way, but it does kind of reflect what we do see is that people will say primary audience is non-gender specific over 45, secondary audience is female 35 to 50. And that doesn't really give us any sense of who you think really is going to be watching your film. So think about the community for your project. What is the community that you are going to attract to come and watch your documentary, watch your series, rather than a demographic per se. So really drill down on audience. And just riffing on that, we do have at the moment, I'm preparing another webinar about an audience design initiative that we're doing in conjunction with Bobby Romea in development. That is an initiative that will help producers understand how to identify their audience, their community for their project. So I really think there's some big opportunities for producers to upskill their knowledge in identifying who their community is for their project. Look, I hope that's been helpful. Like I say, we wanted to jump on today just to, you know, get these changes that are coming in the next month, July 1, in front of you, give you the heads up. I hope it's been useful. I hope it's been helpful. And yeah, if you haven't already subscribed to our comms, please do that. Please go to our website, check in on us regularly. And on behalf of Screen Australia and our Auslan interpreters today, thanks for joining us.